Welcome to Off the Page. I am Will Cain, and I'm joined by Jacob Sullum, who is a senior editor at Reason magazine. Hey, Jacob, I didn't realize this until I just called you on Skype. So you're from Dallas?
We live in Dallas, yeah.
Where do you live in Dallas?
In Preston Hollow.
Oh, I'm
not far from the bushes.
I grew up not far from you. I'm from Sherman, Texas, right up the road.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So, hey, Jacob, you've argued for the legalization of drugs. And for the sake of this conversation, I want to focus on specifically the violence associated with the drug trade. And your article focusing on the violence in Juarez. And look, anybody can open the newspaper multiple times a week and read a story about 20 people found dead in a mine in southern Mexico, or a gangland shootout in the resort town of Acapulco, or literally thousands of deaths every year in Juarez and Laredo. And, you know, it's not just a Mexican problem, and it's not just limited to Mexicans. I mean, 3 U.S. consulate workers were murdered not too long ago. And how many thousands of deaths every year are on the street corners of Baltimore and New York City and Dallas and Los Angeles, for that matter? So you've argued that if we legalize drugs, we would instantly reduce some of this gang, cartel, and border violence. Is that your argument?
Yeah, I mean, I think the essential thing you have to recognize is that when people talk about drug-related violence, it's not really drug-related violence, it's prohibition-related violence. That is, it's the sort of violence you see when you have a black market that's created by the government. It's the sort of violence we saw during alcohol prohibition. You know, the people who were shooting each other during alcohol prohibition were not drunk. It wasn't that the drugs caused them to act violently. It was because the trade was illegal, because criminals were fighting over it. It was highly lucrative because the government made it illegal. And the risk that is attached to dealing in contraband gives you a high profit in a black market. And the only way you have to settle your disputes is through violence. So that is quite predictable. Go ahead.
You're arguing not just for the legalization of possession, then, but also for the production and sale as well.
Yeah, I mean, legalizing possession for use does not address the issue of the black market, because you still have to have a supply.
Right.
And if it's illegal to supply it, you're still going to see this kind of violence. So things like decriminalizing possession of small amounts of marijuana or of other drugs as well, which, by the way, Mexico has done. Very small amounts of drugs for personal use. That's been decriminalized there. Marijuana has been decriminalized to some extent in about a dozen U.S. states. I think that's a step in the right direction. I don't think people should be going to jail because they're using drugs, but it does not address the black market, and therefore it does not address the violence.
Solving the violence problem, does your argument depend on the legalization of all drugs? I mean, if we just legalized the sale and production of marijuana, we really wouldn't do away with cartel violence, would we? So we kind of have to go all bore, according to your argument. Go jump into the pool deep end, crack, heroin, all the pretty drugs as well.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't eliminate the violence, but actually in Mexico right now, most of that violence is related to the marijuana trade. So that would have a significant impact. It certainly wouldn't eliminate all the violence, because you would still have the trade in opium, the trade in cocaine, and the trade in other illegal drugs, and violence is associated with all of those. But you know, the smaller the market is, the less violence is going to be.
Well, so it would
help alleviate the problem.
Help me picture this, how it would work. If you go to CVS, you can go there and find marijuana and heroin produced and sold by Phizer instead of the Juarez cartel?
Well, the way I imagine it, it's not so much Phizer as companies like the ones that supply tobacco and alcohol. And these drugs would be regulated, much like the drugs, alcohol, and tobacco are regulated. It would only be sold to adults, but they would be produced by private companies that would compete to provide people with the effects they're looking for, with as few side effects as possible. And I think that would greatly benefit the consumer. I mean, one of the things that's lost in all the discussion of the war on drugs is that people want drugs. And for the most part, people who use drugs benefit from them, at least by their own lives. They don't suffer any serious bad consequences. So this is a huge consumer loss when you prevent this market from developing. And in fact, I think you would find superior alternatives to what we have now, because right now there's very little room for innovation. You can't patent stuff. You can't compete openly. I think we would see a wide variety of different kinds of drugs that would be available, many of them superior to what we have now.
So you're arguing Camel and Marlboro would produce a safer, better, more innovative, and cheaper product than Juarez, Tijuana cartels, thus putting them out of business?
Well, we don't have to speculate about it. I mean, look at what happened after alcohol prohibition. Did the quality of alcoholic beverages improve? Do you have to worry when you go into a liquor store when you buy, say, a bottle of rum that it says it's, say, 80 proof and it's actually 160 proof?
Right.
Do you have to worry that there's going to be methanol in it that might blind you or kill you? No. I mean, that never happens, and it's because it's a legal, competitive, open market.
Well, look, the cartels are also a multi-billion-dollar business, though. They wouldn't just cede the market to Marlboro. Would you expect that we'd see some kind of climate where there's increased, I don't know what, corporate violence? Would the CEOs of Reynolds and Marlboro have to worry about, I mean, seriously, you really think Juarez and Tijuana and Gulf cartels are just going to step back and go, well, I guess this is all over for us?
Well, you could have said the same thing about Al Capone when Prohibition was, well, he was in jail. But you could have said the same thing about other gangsters that when Prohibition was repealed. How would they allow this market to be taken away from them by legitimate businesses? In fact, that is what happened. And you no longer have suppliers of alcohol shooting each other.
Yeah. What about the cost? What about the social cost of legalized drugs? Wouldn't we see a corresponding uptick in users, addicts, drivers under the influence, violence by addicts? Wouldn't we see a corresponding uptick in violence on this side of the equation?
Yeah, I mean, there would be an increase in use, no question about it. But on the one hand, you have to keep in mind that that's a benefit. To most users, the increased use represents increased satisfaction that they're getting.
Boy.
Now, on the other hand, you have the results of excessive consumption, inappropriate consumption, and you have to weigh that. If you're looking at it from a cost-benefit point of view, you have to weigh the cost of additional drug abuse against the enormous costs that are wrought by the war on drugs.
Boy, I like that
And
argument a lot better.
I think it's. I'm sorry.
I like that argument a lot better than the benefit to users of having readier access to drugs. I can go. Maybe I have to go Bill O'Reilly on you in a minute here. You like that appearance, right?
Well, I think these are demonstrably products that people want. If they consume them and it improves their lives according to their own judgment, and they're not harming other people, I think that should be welcomed. I mean, it should be welcomed in the same way that any other product that satisfies a demand should be welcomed, provided it is not causing damage to other people. And in most cases, it should be emphasized. In most cases, use of these drugs, primarily we're talking about marijuana, does not cause any significant harm to other people or to the user himself.
Okay, fine argument for the adult. And seriously, I know you really enjoyed your Bill O'Reilly appearance, so let me use Bill O'Reilly's argument. What if you legalize drugs, and who cares how many adults actually indulge in greater use of drugs? What about the effect on kids? Doesn't it make it, by taking it out of the black market, more readily accessible to kids? And can't you just picture kids sitting outside of CVS asking adults to buy them a dime bag? Are we ready for that societal cost? Well,
in a sense, it makes it more available. Because, if you have an older brother who can buy marijuana, say, he might be willing to supply you. So in that sense, it makes it more available. But on the other hand, in the black market, nobody cards anybody. I mean, nobody's asking, are you an adult? They don't care. In the legal market, at least you have the potential to regulate and to say, if you as a seller are selling drugs to minors, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to get fined. You're going to get arrested. You're going to lose your license. So you have some measure of control. In the current black market, there's no control at all.
Right.
No control by legal means, by the government. There's no control through the mechanisms of an open competitive marketplace. Right. So it's completely uncontrolled in that sense, and that's why controlled substance is really a misnomer. You at least have the potential to exert some control once this becomes a legal market, and you can have laws and regulations that apply to it.
Okay. Listen, this is Jacob Sullum. He is a senior editor at Reason Magazine. You can find him at reason.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Will Cain. Jacob, I really appreciate you joining me.
Sure, thank you.